Welcome to Permission to Evolve. I'm your host, Brandon Thielk. I'm a performance and life coach. I am joined with my co-host and producer, Holly Deschenes. How are you doing today, Holly?
I'm okay, Brandon. It's the end of a long week that shouldn't feel as long as it did because we had a holiday on Monday, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, the holiday weeks kind of, I don't know, they're always kind of screwy, throws you off a little
Yeah.
bit. So today we are going to be talking about the permission to trust, how to strengthen your faith in your path and the progress you're trying to make. And, I oftentimes, I think the analytical thinker is going to have a hard time with trust. There's going to be a lot of trying to account for all the different variables, and there's generally some anxieties associated with that. And, we're going to just go into like kind of the need for trust, the need for having some sort of faith, and that you really can't plan for everything. We can draw things up to the best of our ability, but there's always unknowns. And really at the bottom of it, this commitment to stay on your path. It's this commitment to work through the struggles and the challenges as they surface. And those are all by design. Those are designed to sharpen you and to develop skill sets that are necessary for your journey. We're going to go a little bit into, why we have this feel for this need for control, where that comes from. With permission to evolve here, we're always kind of looking back to the past, and that's basically created your present. So we bring these things with us, and ultimately it's stored information that we can unpack and learn and grow from if we're willing to examine it and take a look at it. And so this it's an idea of surrender, and surrender seems like it's passive, but it's surrendering the control. It's surrendering needing to know the outcome or how things are going to happen. But that often slows down the process quite a bit. So this surrender is actually, how do I align with flow? How do I take the feedback moment to moment and make adjustments that kind of take me on this path, this journey, where I don't get caught up or stuck too much. And so we're just going to be going into kind of the mechanics of how we trust more, why it's so important, and hopefully kind of strengthen some faith, which is going to be this this commitment to a brighter future, dialing into, that should be aligned with your value system, the most important things to you, the things that excite you. That's what takes you on an adventure, is to kind of have these things working in your mind that I have to believe in this brighter future more than the stagnation or what I'm confronted with right now. I have to be a little bit out in front of myself to really develop that faith. So with this opening, is there anything that comes to mind with you right off the bat here, Holly, with how your faith has grown or trust in the process? Any specific things you felt you really struggled with previously, but now you feel like you're doing a better job with?
Oh, well, you and I have talked about a few of them in our work without being super specific. I think for me personally, just in the last 2 years, right, it's come a long way in terms of just believing whatever happens, it's gonna work out. It's the idea, oh, I think it's The Alchemist, maybe, right? Where it's like the universe is always conspiring in your favor kind of
Hmm.
idea. It's the ability to have a better understanding of that. I don't have like the best words to describe it in this moment, but that the feeling of like, oh yeah, I get what that really means now. It's not just words.
Hmm.
I think that if that kind of answers your question in terms of like really specific things, I mentioned, I think it's been a few podcasts ago, my husband getting laid off from his role and how he worked through that. But it's ideas like that feel less devastating
Hmm.
than they did before.
Hmm. That's good. There's so much in that where it's allowing for the unexpected to happen, and trusting that we can navigate it in a clean way. And there is always there's disappointment, there's letdowns, there's being blindsided by things. That's all kind of part of life, essentially. And we can guard against it, but it can't be the focus that we're going to everything that happens unexpected, that it's automatically a bad thing. A big part of this work is cleaning up mindset to see everything as an opportunity. With everything that happens, that's kind of the deal. It's one of two ways of looking at it. Is this Is this designed to help me grow, or is this designed to bury me? If we've had a lot of failures, letdowns, disappointments, there's almost the expectation that everything is kind of bad. And that's the need for this work. If things are going well and you have a positive outlook and you really do trust the process, it's kind of like you ride the waves. But it's like if we almost expect the rug to get pulled or negative things to happen to us that are going to throw us through a loop, that's all built on really our childhood often of being around unpredictable authority figures, adults, things like that, expecting the next shoe to drop or whatever it is. That stuff needs to be examined because it really affects our mindset and it affects our ability to roll with things, like because we get caught in this protection mode. So that's kind of the main idea here is if our mindset skews negative towards any unexpected thing, it's going to be, I'm trying to protect myself from something that's going to be evidence or info from my past that's being projected into the moment. So I'm going to use those past experiences to further validate like why it's not safe or why I need to create more and more structures and build more of a bubble and so continue to limit my life. We can do that to an extent where we really don't have much wiggle room without creating a ton of anxiety. The need for control goes hand in hand with having anxiety. I'm trying to account for all the variables so that I don't get hurt. But that's ultimately me not trusting myself in those situations. I'm not trusting that if something does happen that I can handle it, that I'm capable of getting up to speed with it and moving through it. Primary things here, if we're going to be not trusting, it's going to be things like betrayal. It's going to be failures. It's going to be letdowns. It's going to be disappointments. It's going to be trauma, things that made us question ourselves, doubt ourselves. We were on this path and then something happened and then everything shifted for us. And maybe that was in a negative way. Also, yeah, being around unstable people, immature people that you kind of don't know what you're going to get from them, that their unstable emotions creates an unpredictability around us. And so it's very difficult to trust things in that place. That's where the anxiety really gets triggered. I would say having anxiety on a regular basis, that is a lack of trust in life. And it's a lack of trust in that things are going to work out. And for good reason, we have those. And so we want to learn from our past so that I can start to relinquish that control and start to get more into the flow of life rather than on this. It's kind of the difference between playing offense and defense. If I'm stuck in defense, I'm just trying to guard against everything that can go wrong. And there are times for that, but that shouldn't necessarily be our default mode. And so if we find ourselves on defense too much, we need to figure out how we can balance that out so that we can make some necessary moves. Seeing these signals in the body as like that's information, that's stuff that you hold from your past, and we can rework it. All this stuff doesn't have to be a life sentence. We can take a deeper look at it and learn about it, and then you can develop skills to kind of master it. What's really interesting is often a lot of the things that came from the pain, that's actually equipped us to be able to surrender the pain. We've built the muscles so that now I can move forward in these certain areas. But the only thing really holding me back still is the remembering of the pain that I'm still holding on to. That's part of letting it go. When we start to let it go and then we take new actions and then we start to get some positive feedback going, that starts to create more and more trust. It's this willingness to question yourself and your kind of default. Yeah, do I have too much predictability in my life? When something new happens, you'll see this a lot of times with travel. Maybe maybe you've experienced this quite a bit with like trying to find gluten-free stuff or whatever. So it's like
Yeah.
we need to like plan these things out so that something unexpected doesn't happen. There's healthy versions of it, which is kind of more under the realm of preparedness. But then there's also, am I limiting my experience because I'm giving in too much to the anxiety where it's like actually shutting down my life? There's nuance to all this stuff. Ultimately, we want to see the signals in the body as information. It's communicating things to us. If I'm having anxiety, yeah, I may need to prepare more. There may be some missing information that if I found it, that would connect a lot of dots for me and I could be at ease. But there's also too much worry that's being projected into every situation where, you stop living your life. That's kind of the main area we want to focus on today, because in that stagnation, in that limitation, There's a lot of hopes and dreams that have like died, that if we could wake some of that stuff back up and open up the mind again, it would be beneficial in a lot of ways. It's your mood is kind of this, what are you looking forward to type of thing? What am I building? What am I growing? That's when we're feeling progress. That's where we start to get joy and fulfillment and things like that. And that's all going to be rooted in trust. And ultimately, it comes back to self trust. So it is kind of that gut check of how am I operating in my life? Is there more that I want? And am I even allowing my mind to go there? Or am I already shutting it down the second I have an idea because I'm afraid of the disappointment or letdown because maybe I've experienced a lot of that and I can't deal with the pain anymore. Maybe I've just chosen to settle because of that, right? And as long as you're still alive, I think we can clean some of these things up. We can wake them back up to produce like better outcomes and actually get you connected back to yourself if you're willing to take that journey.
Before we talk about the sort of skills or the way to get kind of to the other side, what would you call out are things for why it's hard for people to trust, right? Like when I think about in my own life, sure, we could talk about the past, childhood trauma, things like that for sure played into it. But then even I think as you get older, it could be in terms of the predictability, building a lifestyle,
Mhm.
or you've always been a super high achiever. I don't know, some things like that. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about what could be a few of the examples of like, well, this might be a roadblock and how we might go deeper on those things.
With all this stuff, there's like varying degrees. What's your tolerance level for uncertainty? And an entrepreneur, there's massive uncertainty all the time, right? And then there's the stable job path where maybe I have like a lot of structured systems where it's like maybe I'm just looking for a little bit of excitement here and there. You kind of ask yourself, what are you really looking for to like get some excitement going? I think that's a good frame to operate under where, you there's no right or wrong answer, but if your life's totally shut down, that may be something we want to look at. An example of this is, maybe not leaving a job when you know you should. Let's say you're not happy on a regular basis and that predictability is kind of created this, well, I at least know what this is. Where if I venture off in the unknown, our mind is automatically going to start to project in worst case scenarios. Oh, I'm not going to find a job, or how am I going to pay my bills? You start like running down the list, and they're all valid concerns, but the preparedness part is like, how can I soothe myself into seeing that as part of the process? How can I look at that in a way that allows me to take steps? Because if I just stay in the scarcity mindset of this is what I know and there's nothing else, which is often why people stay, and it could be a relationship as well. Maybe it's a bad relationship, but it's, well, at least I know what this entails, or at least I have somebody. It's generally going to be where we have low standards in our life is going to be, it's going to be kind of the just getting by mindset. And that's going to be, at least this brings me stability. And generally we crave this stability because at some point in our life we experience massive instability that may have created a lot of problems for us. It could probably created a lot of pain. These things, we polarize when we go through stress and trauma and difficult things is we usually go to all or none thinking. I did this and so this was really bad. And so now I'm going to play it completely safe. Then we get there and then we're just, well, this isn't exactly what I thought it was either. Well, I have safety and security and I'm comfortable, but all the anxieties that were created in the stressful time are still there. What that does is it starts to create these triggers of, even in this safer environment, you still bump up against those things that get activated. And when a trigger gets activated, we have this whole story and this negative thought process that goes along with that spirals us into that drama. These things are generally like shame based or guilt based, where it it's self-perpetuating in terms of, yeah, I can't tolerate the uncertainty because I know what that was like over here and that caused me a lot of pain. Now it's just, I'm going to stay here, but I don't trust myself to take the steps. We just keep reinforcing this inability to move forward. And that's what creates a lot of stuckness. I'm not trusting that if I take a step that there will be a positive result. My mind's automatically going to go to negative judgment. So that's what we have when we have a survival-based mindset is we're running into things that at one point were painful for us. And just like with anything in life, when you're on a growth path, what got you here like isn't going to get you to the next step. Along with the pain and the letdown, there's been coping mechanisms to deal with those emotions. A lot of times they get suppressed, or we have escape routes built into our mind to when this happens, yeah, maybe I remove myself from the situation or I withdraw or whatever it is. We have these coping mechanisms in response to the stress. A lot of those stresses, those coping mechanisms will only get us so far, where it's going to be that's actually the thing that's holding us back. And that could mean, in relationships, that could mean if the silent treatment was used growing up, that's what I learned. It could be like, well, yeah, it's not safe to have these conversations or to be confrontational, or, you're supposed to just pretend like it didn't happen. But then at what cost? There's bitterness and resentment, and you respect the person less. There's all these things that happen, all this damage that gets done when these challenges aren't met. There's this idea that, oh, it's just going to pass. And then we move forward. And the thing is, everything comes at a cost where there's an accumulation. I can only stay in that bad relationship so long, or that bad job, where before it really starts to affect me on a deep level. And that's where we kind of start to feel more lifeless, and where we feel like we're going through the motions and that we're not really living our life because we have so many things we're trying to protect ourselves from. And every time we bump up against the emotions, we shut them down, or we self-medicate, right? That could be pharmaceuticals, that could be drinking. And there's all these like escapes we have to soothe the discomfort, when the discomfort's a signal that, hey, I stopped living life here. And if I can meet it and feel the discomfort and ask deeper questions about it, I'll get some answers into to what's holding me back, what's making me feel miserable or negative, whatever label you want to put on it. But there's something that I've shut down and that I'm not allowing myself to feel. But that's the exact information I need in order to move forward and trust. If I don't trust, I can move past these boundaries within myself, which is the discomfort. Now I just build this very predictable system, but it's lifeless at the same time. I'm not allowing for new things to fill in. And so that's where we get into tolerance level. What degree, if everything's extremely predictable and you live the same day every day, we need some sort of excitement to work with there. So we would sprinkle in like some unexpected things that aren't like, there's not a high cost associated with them, where it's just like, okay, I'm going to put myself out there in a manageable way to try and familiarize myself again with new things. So if you look at kids, like before all the damage gets done, they're living life, they're in flow, they're not insecure, they're not worried about things, they're adventurous. There's all these things that kind of point to our nature. And through challenging situations, through pain, we shut things down to make things more manageable. It's getting to that place of like, well, if I'm not happy with my current circumstances, that is going to take some degree of me doing something a little bit different. It doesn't have to be this huge move. It could just be what's something that kind of makes me feel alive again, where it's exciting and uncomfortable, like exciting and there's a little bit of anxiety and fear in there. Because we need things to like grab onto that can like pull us out of these kind of predetermined patterns. That's when you start to wake things back up. When we have small doses of that we allow ourselves to move through, generally there is a reward on the other side. Even if it doesn't go the way we wanted it to, there's going to be some new thought going on. There's going to be something that sparks from that. And that's what really gets the wheels turned. And it's just, oh, that was cool. Like maybe I want some more of that. You try to like stretch yourself in these new ways where you can find this rhythm that works for you. And okay, yeah, like based on everything I went through, it really does serve me to have a lot of stability. But this might be kind of boring now. So I might need something to spice it up. It's just allowing yourself to go there if that's where you're at. If you're just in that place of, I know exactly what's coming every day, like that is the definition of really going through the motions. All these things become very practices. And then we can't step outside of that without massive anxiety or fear coming up because we've been doing that too long.
So let's talk a little bit about your definition or your meaning of trust. How do we move from this sort of, we don't really trust it, we like our routine or we like our predictable outcomes or whatever that is, into what you're really meaning in terms of trust from the aspect of believing that tomorrow can be better than today or those sorts of things.
I look at everything as a mirror. So if I'm not trusting externally, I'm not trusting internally. Our mind is oriented externally. So it's going to focus on out there. And that's where we get caught in the ego, where we might be like blaming things. It's like, oh, it's this person's fault, or this happened and there's nothing I can do about it, or whatever. We get kind of caught in this trap of being externally focused. And so our power is always internal. So if I'm not trusting a situation or trusting a move, there's something I don't trust about myself. It's self-trust is really the centerpiece here, where that might be completely valid if you're trying something new. If I haven't developed the skill set, if I have no idea what I'm doing, I'm not going to have certainty in myself in relationship to that. In those instances, what we're trying to do is familiarize ourselves with whatever it is. I need to get to know this at a deeper level so that I can start to back up the actions I'm taking with more and more certainty. The knowledge piece is like, is there more information I need? We have unlimited access to information and experts at every single thing under the sun at this point, right? So it's just like there's a recipe for everything. I might just need to get to know the ropes, right? I might need to understand what's going on there. And then that might solidify or calm the anxieties. That might start to allow that trust to take shape as I'm starting to conceptualize what the path might look like. The other one is like, well, I might be sabotaging a lot of things in my life because I don't trust myself. You'll see this commonly in relationships. In the dating world, it's kind of like, oh, it's always the other person's fault. But it's like we push people away because we're actually rejecting ourselves. I don't trust myself in these situations. Maybe I didn't have a good model for marriage growing up, or maybe the way my parents raised me, I didn't like that. So maybe I don't trust myself to raise kids. There's all these things that it's going to be, well, what's the lack? Where's that coming from? We want to address that void because you may be shutting down a whole area of your life just because you don't trust yourself in relationship to it because of the models that you've had. That's like a lack of information, where maybe we find somebody who does that really well and that can teach us that process, so we can see the deficiencies in ourselves and relationship to it and be like, oh, well, I've been operating on a lot of limited ideas here. That, once again, survival thinking is that all or none thinking. It's catastrophizing, it's worst case scenarios. And we're trying to find nuance. And that's what, when we get into details, that's where we start to establish some more self trust. When we start to learn at a deeper level why things happened to me and why it was painful and where that came from, now I start to, in that understanding, I start to calm my system. Because if we don't create that awareness, basically we don't understand what the problem's stemming from, so we're going to be motivated to recreate it over and over again. And that's really what sabotage is we're on repeat until we learn self-worth, until we learn the pieces that, hey, like, I can actually create anything I want, I can actually generate these things if I get in tune, if I start to dial into what held me back in the past, what created the pain. I don't want to become that. So that doesn't mean I block that out. It means I try to understand the thing I don't want to become so that I'm not pushing against it anymore. I'm starting to accept it because I'm no longer afraid of it. Ultimately, the self-trust comes from knowing yourself at a deeper level, and then acting from that place. You're leveraging your strengths, you're leveraging your knowledge base, you're doing what you know how to do. But then the more problems you solve as well, this is where doing hard things, working through problems, really starts to serve us. Is then I have all these experiences I can pull from where I took something from a negative place and I turned it into something better. That's what starts to establish some confidence, where I can start to be more dynamic in the moves I make because I'll trust that I can figure it out along the way. And that's where experience really comes in. So experience is like, okay, I've solved 1,000 problems. Like, what makes this one ever any different? And in that place, we start to have this. So confidence and self trust are going to go hand in hand. of like, yeah, like I know what I'm doing. And when the unexpected things come in, my mind's worked this puzzle so many times that I don't see the problems as any different. I just see them as like different angles on the problem. I've worked this over and over again, so I'm just going to make these adjustments. And because your mind can conceptualize what you need to do a lot better when you have all that data to pull from. And so that's why it's really important to be working through your problems, not avoiding them or leaving them in this place, because in the negative place, it's basically stuck in the back of our mind and it's like lurking there. And we feel like it's kind of haunting us. We feel like someday we're going to get found out or it's going to get us. That's why it's important to face those things, because now it's like, I don't have this kind of negative thing that I'm expecting to happen, because you see this a lot with people where they'll try and convince themselves that they're positive, or they'll convince themselves that they have a positive expectation, but you don't like hear it in their voice. You kind of hear the concern of like, yeah, I actually expect the rug to be pulled. I expect something difficult to blindside me, because that's their experience. That's the value of looking back and looking at those different things that have happened and trying to understand them at a deeper level, because on some level, we're unconsciously creating a lot of these problems ourselves. When we do the cleanup work, there's less fears you have because you've gained the wisdom from the things that have gone wrong previously. And that's, I'm not a massive action person for that reason. You've already lived a ton of life. You just haven't extracted what you needed to. You have all these experiences you can pull from, but many people just want to keep moving forward and they keep recreating the same problems because they're not addressing what went wrong previously. So it's just, oh, that's in the past. Well, you're stuck in the past now. Your energy's there. You're worried about the same thing happening again. And as long as it's there, it's eating up energy, but then it's also creating the likelihood through lack of awareness, you're going to be indirectly recreating that similar scenario over and over again until you actually learn the lesson. It's this personal responsibility piece of like, well, I may have not have been in control my whole life. There might have been, I was dealt a certain hand, I was raised a certain way, I was put in just different environments. I didn't have control over that. But that's the stuff that like eats away. That's what needs to be handled, because that's where all the old tapes come from. That's where the worth issues come from. That's where the lack of trust comes from. If we can examine these things and learn to rework how we're seeing them so that I know how to move forward without this being recreated, that's going to be created through awareness of me looking at that situation at a deeper level and understanding where it came from, how it happened, and how I'm going to do better in the future. It's this whole chain that happens where if we're addressing things, we can trust more and more because I know how to work through the problems, but then also there's nothing hanging around in the background that's got fear attached to it. I can start to trust the process more because I know I can handle it. I've been handling my business all along the way. So now it's no longer going to jump out of nowhere, right? Like I've accounted for it and I've learned those lessons. So now that's where I adjust my behavior and do things differently in order to safeguard from that happening again. We just continue to, there's all these layers and levels to this, but we continue to level up the way we operate. That's how you have breakthroughs, is you shift your behaviors, you shift your mindset, you see things differently. But if you've left it in the same place as like, oh, that was a bad experience and I'm never going to look at it again, that's going to be in the back of your mind until you do. So that's where the lack of trust comes from, is because there's this blind spot that you're not willing to address. And so that blind spot, that lack of awareness around it, that means unconsciously we're going to get hit with it. And that's really what being blindsided is. There's something I could feel, there's something I was in tune with, but it was too hard, so I didn't want to look at it. But I have to look at it because that's the piece that's going to get me to my next level.
All that makes sense to me, but if we're talking about someone who's just sort of starting out on this, I have to work on ways to build, and there's evidence-based things. You can look back on your life and be, well, I'm, to your earlier point, I'm still alive today, therefore I have overcome every problem that's hit me to this point. But if we're really working on building self-trust from a place where you feel like you don't have much of it, what are some of the smaller steps that can be taken? We talked about this on a previous podcast a little bit too, this idea of well, you keep the promises you make to yourself. But I think about how can we make it more specific, more tangible for people than that.
I think a big one is to interject a pause into situations. Many times we're reacting to things. So I feel a big emotion and then immediately I jump into something. I think a pause is helpful of like, oh, I feel a lot of emotion right now. I think at least most people have some sort of awareness of like, yeah, I'm triggered or I have some big emotion coming. In that place, it's like, yeah, how do I take a step back? How do I take some deep breaths? How do I not just automatically react to things? And how do I create some space to get to the place of response? Okay. And that's so the pause is important where that allows the dust to settle. And then we can get out of our survival thinking and just take a look at the situation through a different lens, because a lot of our bad decision making where we don't trust ourselves is going to be coming from reaction. um, that somebody did this to me and I immediately did this. The pause is it's difficult, but it's also that space is it can be very helpful, and there's the taking little steps. Okay, I'm going to create more uncertainty intentionally. Like I might on the way to work, I might stop and talk to somebody, where before I just look down at the ground and walk by them. I might just start to deviate from my normal path slightly. Just small things that could just start as a simple hello with a smile, right? It could just be these little things of like, well, I'm going to open myself up in a new way that I haven't been doing. And then along with this, we're detaching from outcome. So the biggest problem is we think that every action we take should have some sort of like predetermined outcome that we're after. But everything is this ongoing process and journey. It's more of like I have to take the steps consistently over time. And then that's when outcomes start to reveal themselves. That's part of the faith piece is I have to find things that motivate me internally rather than externally. So I'm going to do this because of some value I have or something I want to try or but I'm doing it for me. Okay, so it's like the external validation, that's a trap where it's I'm looking for some approval, I'm looking for something outside myself and I can't control that. Okay, so as soon as I don't get that, I automatically think this was a wasted experience and this is a bad thing. Okay. When we view everything as a process of like, I'm going to take these steps because this is what's interesting to me, or like I'm curious about it. And I don't really need it to be anything. I think we become obsessive about, like money and goals. And I need this to happen from this. Otherwise, I'm not going to do it. That's all. Those expectations are way off base, because it's just like everything takes time, everything takes working at it, everything takes showing up, and then each experience you gain data from how did this go down? What are some things I could do differently? We unpack the experience to learn from it, not I'm going to do it once and then if it's not perfect, I'm just going to give up. It's this ability to stick with things and understand that good things take time. That's why we need something that excites you. That's why we need something that has some sort of juice for it, because it's just like, well, yeah, this is kind of worth me taking some small risks. This is worth me taking some steps. I know I would like to change this area. So what's the smallest thing I can do to head in that direction? We want to get some wins under our belt. That's why we want to start small. You don't want to take a massive step because you're going to fail. If you haven't done it before, there's going to be a doubt, there's going to be hesitation, there's going to be all sorts of things. We have to learn to take the pressure off. We have to learn to see things very simply where it doesn't, we don't want to wrap up a bunch of meaning in everything that happens. We want to be, this is an action I want to take. I'm going to take it and it's going to be imperfect and it probably won't go the way I want it to. I don't go too much into needing it to be a certain way. And I'm just doing it for the fun of it. I'm just doing it to kind of stir some things up in me and shake things up so that I can branch off my path slightly. That's we do small things that we can feel good about taking that step. That's slightly scary but mostly exciting. That's kind of that recipe. If it's very scary, we can't feel the excitement underneath it. That's where we might get locked up. It's that self-compassion piece of how can I take the pressure off? How can I make this easy on myself? How can I give myself the benefit of the doubt? How can I allow myself time and space to let things to develop? And partially a big area people get hung up is when they go to start something new, what they do is they go run around and tell everybody in their life they're about to do this. And then they're talking to people that don't get it or say negative things to them or say they're stupid or whatever it is. And then that kills it the instant they did that. It's just like, find things you can keep close to your heart that you're doing for you and take those steps. Maybe share it with like trusted people or people that are supportive, but that's an inexact science. There are some people, it just depends on the mood, depends on a lot of variables. So that's why we're trying to connect back in with ourselves and establish self-trust. We do need some sort of controlled environment for ourselves to operate in. And usually the less people we include on that, the better, because that allows us to start to familiarize ourselves with these new actions. We're not dealing with criticism. We're not dealing with any of that. So it allows me to just kind of experiment and try things out. And it makes it like low pressure, and I'm not answering to anybody, because as soon as I start telling people, and let's say I'm not following through on things and then they're asking me about it, now I'm going to start to feel shame. It's all these different, they're all kind of chains. Like once you go down one road, that leads to five other things. We want to set you up for success. That means make it as simple as possible. It means take very small steps, and the steps should be something that's interesting or exciting to you. It doesn't have to be anything dramatic, but once you start to catch a rhythm, once you get small wins under your belt, once you get some excitement and some curiosity flowing, because there are going to be new ideas that follow if you start taking steps, because your mind's expanding. And so it's going to be opening up to new things that you've previously shut down. But you're going to start to take bigger steps over time. And then as you start to take bigger steps, you're going to be confronted with your past. This is 100% of the time, because we're trying to open the mind back up. Okay. So it's got all these protection mechanisms. And so you're going to feel good about some things, and then you're going to hit a wall. And that's going to be that first challenge of, do I really want this? Do I want to keep going? Because that challenge is designed to strip away the limiting beliefs. It's designed to pull the things out of you that you can't take with you to the next step. So you simply just have to follow the path. And this is a pretty exact science, to be honest with you. I've seen it thousands of times. When you open up your system, now you're confronted with the things you believe. Okay. And if you believe negative things about that situation, or you believe it's not possible, you're going to be confronted with that. Does this have enough behind it where I want to continue on this journey, and I want to confront these things about myself, and I want to continue to do the work? Because the work comes in, now it's no longer fun, but now it's actually pushing me to grow. And when we grow, that progress we're making, that's what creates fulfillment. That's going to be a more sustainable good feeling, is like, oh, I feel content with myself. I feel like I'm doing things outside the box. I feel like I'm doing things that were terrifying to me before. That's kind of something that carries you through the challenges that are going to continue to come. We start small. You're going to hit a wall at some point, and it's just like, okay, what happens there? I can try something else, but then I'm kind of restarting that process. That's why we want to be. There is that period, we've talked about that before, where maybe it is you just try a bunch of things out and be shallow about it. You're not going into the depths, but ideally we find something that creates a little bit of purpose behind it. So you get that extra push, where it's just, this is hard, but it's actually the good kind of hard. It's the good kind of hard, where I'm challenging my beliefs about myself, and it's starting to shake me up, where I'm starting to see bigger possibilities for me, rather than I just want the same predictable day every day.
So there's an element of all of this in terms of trusting that seems to lean on, faith ideas. We opened with that a little bit, right? And the universe is always conspiring in your favor. So let's just talk a little bit about that piece in regards to trusting.
Yeah. So, faith is, I would say it's a trust in the unknown. Um, so there's a self-trust piece, but then we have to like orient ourselves to even like a bigger picture to continue to like pull us forward. So that's the belief in a brighter future. We could go into the spiritual aspects of like a higher power or some like ultimate version of you, of I have faith that like I can make these things happen. And that's generally a longer timeline we're working with, right? And so with faith, it's some idealized thing that we're kind of hanging out there that we can continuously focus on, that like pushes us towards things that cause we basically have to grow into it. And so faith is a lot of times when you have something that's pulling you to a higher version, it's you end up taking steps kind of blindly. It's just like, oh, I feel like I have to do this, and so I'm going to go do it. And this is terrifying, but I don't know why, but I just have to do it.
Right.
That's faith, of like, you kind of just feel pulled into things where that's the adventure piece. That's like we have to have something bigger we're latching onto, that's like driving this growth out of us. That is where we get into that realm of like, well, I don't know, I feel like I have to go do this and I'm going to go do it. And generally that the dots that might not connect right away, it might not make sense, and you're like, oh, I thought I was supposed to do this, and then like nothing happened, but that might not be revealed to you till later on, you know
Right.
um I mean, I speak about it all the time. It was just like, meeting you in Milwaukee. Like, I thought I
Right.
was going to the race for another reason. And then I met you, and then like all these things have stemmed from that. But it was a gap of time in between, Milwaukee and until I started seeing what was developing here.
Right.
And so,
Right.
so that's like the faith piece is like, well, I don't need to know why. And my mind can't even conceptualize that. Like it's just like it's a huge unknown, and it's going to be revealed later, and I have to be at peace with that. I have to be willing to act on things without the outcome. I have to be willing to act on things without knowing when the timing's going to line up. That's kind of like a bigger level of trust, is we're putting ourselves, in this place of trusting that I'm clear on what my vision is, or I'm getting a better sense of it. I have to keep moving towards it one way or another, even if it looks like things aren't going to work out, or, I'm screwed or whatever it is. It's just this, I don't know. I keep feeling pulled by this. Like, it's going to be this thing you can't shake, right? It's going to be, I have to keep moving towards this, through thick and thin. Like, I don't know what it is. So that's when, you're onto something special, is that pulling you through, where it's like almost the problems become diminished, because it's just like the purpose gets to be so much bigger, where it's like, yeah, this sucks, but I'm willing to struggle for it. I'm willing to go put myself in shitty situations to make this happen. That's kind of that bigger level, right? So it's we build the self-trust first to learn how to navigate the nuances of situations. Like, hey, this is how I can continuously realign with my path, and find my way, and continue to grow, and take the steps I need to. But then there's going to be a bigger thing where you're going to be asked to jump here and there. You're going to take big leaps, and you don't know what it's about. And you can't be in the analytical mind for that. You got to surrender. You got to let go, and you just got to follow it. That's the bigger picture stuff. So that's kind of like the graduated level. I have to be able to act. You know, I could be looking at like a mountain of terrible things, but I still may need to take a step where I'm just like, this doesn't make sense for me to do this, but I know I have to do it. And then it gets revealed later on. That's where we're really in our heart, is when we're able to do those things. And it's almost like the fear becomes secondary then. It's kind of like, well, I trust that this is going to work out somehow. I don't know how, but it's not my job to know how. I just have to follow the path. And the gap is the most difficult part with that, is like often, um, for like a spiritual person, if you're in that gap and you expect something to happen, there might be like, oh, I feel like betrayed by God or something.
Sure.
There's all these different things that can happen in that place of sitting in the discomfort, sitting in the uncertainty. But there is jumping off points every step of the way. That's the importance of sticking with things. Many people give up, right before something bigger is going to happen, right? Because it's sitting in the void, sitting in that uncertainty. It does wear on you, but it also like kind of burns off a lot of the insecurities and the embarrassment stuff and the external validation. Like you start to shed all that stuff where you start to care less and less what other people think because you're more guided by your heart. You're more like, oh, this is my thing, and I just have to stick with it, and it doesn't really matter about anybody else.
Right.
That's what we're really trying to get to, where it's really this purification process that happens where, if you answer the call, if you go with it, and you take the steps, like you have to shed all those things, all those insecurities. You have to let it all go, and that gap is kind of what burns that stuff off of you if you're willing to stick with it. It's extremely challenging. It's kind of being put through the ringer, but on the other side of it, it's just like you develop a new level of confidence. You have a greater degree of self trust and trust in the universe or whatever you want to call it. It's in that process where you're just like, okay, I've seen the evidence, these things came through and I didn't know how they were, but they did. So then you catch this rhythm where you actually start to depend on it. You start to rely on that in some way. I don't know how I'm going to get out of this, but I will. Like, or I don't know how this is going to happen, but something will happen, right? Like you kind of just
Right.
start to bank on uncertainties, which is quite the opposite of the control and the planning and like all the. It's just kind of like, well, it kind of all that stuff goes out the window, and I would say it's like a graduation. There's those things to start to build your strength, but at a certain point it is like we need to surrender that stuff and act more in faith, because that's when things get really interesting and really cool. You start to once again shed all these like kind of lower insecurities. A lot of the survival stuff, you really just start to trust that you're taken care of and that things are going to work out. And so it causes you to take these steps that, might seem crazy to other people, but you're just like, well,
Sure.
like this is what I have to do. I don't know what to tell you. I don't really care anymore. Right.
Right.
So that's kind of the realm of faith that we can talk about. It's like this bigger trust that pulls you in weird ways that are very unexpected, but it's also that's what takes you on the adventure of a lifetime. So it's pretty cool stuff. Like if you're willing to go there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Brandon, I think that all of that was like really good points to make. And I know that some people might have their interest piqued in terms of how can they move through this and maybe get some coaching or some work done with you in some way to move on this journey of trust. So if someone wanted to reach out to you, what are the best ways? What are some things that you're kind of, offering in terms of ways for people to connect?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, I think this topic specifically highlights the need for a coach or a guide. Yeah, because when we're talking about moving through uncertainty, it is kind of this idea of like having somebody who's done these things over and over again can be extremely helpful in charting the path and knowing what to expect and how to move through these things. If anybody's interested in going a little bit deeper with me or understanding a little bit more about the process, they can visit my website. That's brandonthielk.com. And on there, you can book a 30-minute strategy session with me, and we'll go into what your goals and ambitions are, or what's holding you back. And I can share with you how I can assist you in your development. And also, if you want to sign up for my newsletter on the website, there's a little box for that. Every Monday, I send out the lightning report. And so that'll give an update on the podcast. I also provide some insights for the week to help guide you through it. Stay tuned in the future. I'll be putting out a masterclass that'll be free. And then we'll be opening up another group program here shortly for the Lightning Lab. So just stay tuned on that stuff. And then if you want to follow me at Brandon Thielk on Instagram, that's where I post most often. And yeah, just DM me if you need anything or have any questions, and we'll see where we can get going.
Yeah, awesome. And we'll make sure all the links to all the socials, the website, all that stuff is in the show notes.
Sounds good. Well,
All right.
thanks, Holly.
Yeah.
Thanks for
All right.
everyone listening. We look forward to next time.
Yeah, sounds good.
All
Talk to
right.
you later, Brandon.
Bye.